Welcome to my podcast. I'm sitting in a beautiful sitting room in Highclere Castle. The blinds are actually drawn because it's a wonderfully hot, sunny day, which is glorious, and no more suitable day on which to welcome my podcast guest, Veronica Henry. Welcome, Veronica. You are an author, scriptwriter. You worked on The Archers, which I really want to talk about. And I've also so much enjoyed your latest book, The Secret Beach.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you for coming. I don't really know where to start because there were so many things I wanted to ask you. But perhaps in a sense, why don't we start with the book I've just finished of yours called The Secret Beach?
Yes.
And I think I read it's your 20th book or 22nd?
Gosh, do you know, I start to lose count after 20. I think it might be 21st.
Wow.
Or 22nd.
So you are, because I've managed to write, I think, 6 books. Oh, my goodness.
Yes.
And you are so much more successful and prolific than I am.
Well,
I don't know how you do it.
I don't know. I think you've probably got a few sales there under your belt. But yes, it does make me feel old having that many books.
You don't look old at all.
Oh,
so
you're
that's
sweet.
Silly. Don't
Yes.
worry about that, Ron.
Podcasters won't be able to tell, but yeah. It's. I write a book a year basically. So yeah, and I've been doing it for more than 20 years. So yeah, it starts stacking up.
So when you write a book such as The Secret Beach, because as a fellow author, I'm always interested in whether it's a character that spurs you on, or a storyline, or an event you've come across, or a place. What's often your starting point when you begin to write a book?
It's quite often a mixture of all of those things, but there's usually something that triggers it. And in this instance, I very much wanted to write about lifeboats, saving lives at sea, which I was obsessed with during lockdown, really inspired me. And I live by the sea, so all those small towns that have got a lifeboat, absolutely the whole of life kind of revolves around those institutions. And where would we be without them? I mean, they do such amazing work. And I met this incredible girl who is a member of the Appledore RNLI, and I was just so inspired by her. She's extraordinary. She's called Lucy, and you know, if her alarm goes off at 3:00 in the morning, she's out of bed, into her Uggs, into the car, and 15 minutes later she's out on the high seas in a boat going to rescue somebody or something, whether it's a human or a dog. And I just am in awe of all of those people, and I just thought, how interesting. I'd love to write about that. But I enlarged it a little bit, so it's about the family, it's about the town, it's about how
Community.
the sea is almost a character in itself and kind of dominates everyday life.
With a name like The Secret Beach, I have to say I immediately thought Enid Blyton.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, we all loved Enid Blyton. I mean, who
loved
didn't?
Enid
Even if we weren't
Blyton.
allowed to read it. I know there were some parents back in the day who were like, oh, you mustn't read that, it's terrible. And I don't know why, because she's the most fantastic storyteller and just captured every child's imagination that got their hands on the Castle of Adventure or the...
And there was always a secret beach or a secret cove.
Absolutely.
And a rowing boat. And it all happened out at sea. And as children, we used to spend our holidays on the North Cornish coast.
Oh, wonderful.
So we were always looking for secret coves, secret caves. And we learned a lot, actually, in terms of being respectful of the sea.
And always fear it. The sea always wins, you have to, and that's, a big lesson, I think. And actually the Secret Beach is based on a beach that's near me. I live in North Devon, and there was a beach that's just a bit off the beaten track, so it's much more secluded because most people can't be bothered to walk to it. And that's what my kids and I used to call it, let's go to the Secret Beach. So that kind of gave me the title, which is, who doesn't want to go to a secret beach?
Well, I immediately wanted to go to a secret
Yes,
beach.
exactly.
And when you're drawing out your lead characters, do they develop as you write, or do you have an idea of where you're going with them?
I sort of start off with a sketch of them all, and with this one in particular, so Nikki was my heroine, if you like, the one that was driving the story, but I knew very much that I wanted to colour in a bit more with her family around her, and I wanted to do something about sisters. I don't have a sister myself, but I'm very interested in that sort of sibling rivalry and the notion of the loud, outgoing sister and then the quieter one. And so I started with that, and then I also wanted to write about her mother, who 20 years ago there was a lifeboat disaster, so it's sort of a little bit sort of influenced by that. And Helen lost her husband. And I just wanted to write a story about a woman, an older woman, embarking upon the dating scene. And I've had so much response from women saying, oh, I just loved her story. It was amazing. You know, it's daunting. She's 67. It's quite scary, but she's decided that having been a widow for quite a long time, she's just ready for a bit of romance and a bit of maybe being looked after or spoiled a bit by somebody. So it was fun to write that.
And there's a small detail also of the scones where you put the jam or the cream first.
Ah, yes. Well, that's an eternal
You
debate.
had to put that in there, which is particularly important.
I'm Devon, so I'm cream first, I think. But some would say jam first. I don't really understand why you put the jam on
Cornish
first.
and we're jam first and then cream.
Oh, okay.
But I think you're the reverse.
I don't care. Just
but you're
get
on the
it
borders,
in.
aren't you?
I really don't care. Just get it in whichever way you like.
So you live 100% of the time. You're based down by the sea.
Yes, by the sea, and I can actually see Cornwall from my window. So I'm in Devon, but I'm just just up from the border, so I can see Cornwall as well. So I've got it all going on, really.
I think I've been down to Cornwall all my life, every single year, and it's going over the bridge, and you see the sound Kernow.
Yes.
And which is the Cornish word for Cornwall.
Yes.
And then suddenly I almost feel a weight has been lifted off me, and I'm going back in time and back into some of my childhood.
And you just feel lighter.
And I do feel lighter, and I'm heading to my number 2 sister has a house on the North Cornish coast now.
Wonderful.
So I have 5 sisters.
Wow.
Really, so
so you know about the sister rivalry thing.
But actually we don't have much rivalries, so we're probably the opposite.
Yeah.
We just have support, but it's a little bit different for us. But it's interesting looking at different sisters and siblings and rivalry. And of course, here we are sitting in the real Downton Abbey.
Yes.
And the whole story began to turn on sibling rivalry.
Amazing. Well, it's just, as a writer, it's just a fantastic, because you have to love your siblings, yet you could, there's jealousies, there's little things to argue about, and big things to argue about, actually, and attention, everybody wants a bit of attention, so the stakes can get high. Really.
But my parents were always really good, and they always said, we love you all equally, and they kept on saying that.
That's pretty
important. They always told us to love each other. So those two things, sadly, our parents died very young of cancer, but we've never forgotten those two things. And it's always saying it out loud, because sometimes I think in England or the UK, things are held back and not said. And I think, we've all learned, say it how it is, say it, and it's communicating. People can't read your mind.
That is great. What a good example you're setting us all.
Well, I don't know about that, but I also think when you're writing a book, people can't read your mind about your characters, so you have to demonstrate it, write it, speak it, describe it. It's absolutely fascinating the way it unfolds, and then it's also the things that are not said. Yes, and which people pick up.
Circling back to your original question, they sort of evolve. You get a kind of idea of them to start with, and you think, you give them an occupation or a job or a business, and they're the basic characteristics of what they're like. So Nikki's sort of fairly straight, fairly reliable, whereas her sister Jess is pretty wild and pretty out there and a real extrovert. But then gradually you have to you don't want to make them caricatures of themselves, so they have other qualities that come in as you write. That kind of evolves, and you think, oh, okay, so actually Jess is a nurse, so although she's pretty wild and out there, she's fantastic in A&E. She's just the person that you'd want looking after you if you ended up in A&E. So that sort of is reversing the expectation of what she's like, and that comes out in the writing of it rather than the planning. If that doesn't sound too precocious, the magic happens as you start to write, and they come to life.
So do you start to write every autumn, or do you have a plan, or when do you start to write if you're publishing?
I write a book a year, so I've just put my next book to bed. So I finished the proofreading, which is literally the last time you can fiddle with it at all. That's the last chance to make any changes, which is always a bit, I'm sure you've said, it's the same. You're giving your baby away. So I've just finished that. But I always start thinking about the next book before I finish the one that I'm writing. So I've kind of got ideas for the next, and I have words with my agent and my editor about what it'll be about and kind of get it signed off so that I can start researching and thinking, so that when I've finished, I can hit the ground running with the next one. So there's no respite, no holiday allowed. But I love this bit of the process, actually, when just the planning bit and the research and the, what are they all going to be called? You know, the fun bits before the hard work starts.
Because quite a lot of the names of your books are quite homely.
Yes.
Or quite beachy.
Yes.
You know, it's about, the beach huts or the homes or things like that. So it's really rooted in the simple things that matter to us all. And I don't use simply in a light fashion.
No.
It's in an essential fashion, a heartfelt fashion, if you like. Is that a deliberate ploy?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I like to write about families, and relationships and things that we can all relate to. Although I do like to take my readers somewhere lovely that they may not be going to otherwise. So a beach, or the last one was set in Paris, which is my favourite place in the world. So I kind of whisk the reader off to Paris. But it's still, I'd like to think they can still identify with the characters. It's not too escapist in a kind of unachievable way. It's a sort of achievable escapism, so that the reader can think, oh, I could do that, I could be there.
So are you fluent in French?
No. No, I've got sort of A-level plus bits of staying over there and learning very inappropriate
Because I gather
slang.
you studied Latin at university.
Yes, I did.
But then I think on your website it said you were bilingual, or you translate.
I did a bilingual secretarial course. I don't think that means I'm bilingual, though.
But bilingual in which, I was wondering if it was in Latin.
No, French. I did French, so it was sort of learning how to be a secretary, but in French. But I don't think I was bilingual myself. It was just that the course was teaching you, back in the day when you could do a secretarial course, which was a very useful thing to do.
Very useful thing
because it just got you into places, got me into the BBC. So,
which is a wonderful place to start, isn't it?
Absolutely brilliant. I couldn't believe it when I got the job. It was sort of pinch me. It was just a sort of bit of luck, really.
And do you want to share what your first job was?
Yes, so my first job was typing Archer scripts. And then, I was a production secretary on the Archers, which was just a dream. And that's kind of where I fell in love with storytelling, actually, because I realised, everybody who was an Archers fan was so passionate.
Yes.
And, around the countryside, it went out at 7:05 in those days. And I just knew that there were people, having a glass of wine or chopping an onion for spaghetti bolognese, but being transported to Ambridge for 15 minutes, they could forget their worries. They could get entangled up in Phil and Jill's marital woes or, business problems or, what was Sheila up to. And they were just, it sort of switches your brain off from your own reality in a way. And I thought, wow, that's really important in life, and that's what I want to get involved in.
Ronnie, for those of our listeners who are overseas or in America and may not be glued to the Archer on Radio 4, do you want to explain a little bit about what the Archers actually is?
Absolutely. Well, it's a radio drama, a kind of a soap opera, if you like, that was started after the war, and the idea was it was sort of to teach people about the land and to get back to the land after the war. So it started off as a sort of almost a public education service, and it's based around a farming family called the Archers, which is why it's still called that. And just it was billed as the everyday story of country folk. So that was the kind of the trailer for it, if you like. And yes, I can't remember how many years later that is. So many, many, many years later. It's still going strong, and it's hugely popular, and the audience has grown and grown. I think because audio is back in very much. But also, it's easy. You can listen to it in the car. You can listen to it in the kitchen. It's just a comfort. I think that's what it is. It's a comfort. There's a familiarity to it. It's easy. It's also funny. It's
funny and it's sad.
It's funny and it's sad, and it's us. It's all of us wrapped up in a family, an extended family. There's many, many more characters now. So there's all sorts of different people, and it's become much more diverse, for example, now. But yeah, it's just, I think it's a national treasure. It really is.
I sometimes think that perhaps it still goes on because it's reassuring that it's still there, and carrying on, and that familiarity speaks to us in quite an essential place within us, in our subconscious.
Absolutely. As long as the Archers is on the radio, we're all okay, kind of thing. But also it's reassuring in its content, although bad things happen in the Archers and people do bad things, eventually all is well, things turn out okay. But they do some quite serious issues now as well. There's been some pretty compelling storylines that are
then
shocking.
discussed in the national newspapers.
Absolutely. Yes, but it's brought all sorts of things like domestic violence, a spotlight on that, which is not something that they may have done before, but it's quite powerful,
It is powerful, because you care.
Yes, absolutely.
So do you think working on a radio programme where it's all about speech influenced your later style of writing at all? Or?
Definitely. I was really so while I was typing the scripts, I was I like to say I went to the University of Ambridge in a way, because the producer, William Smethurst, who was a brilliant spinner of all sorts of stories, would hand me the scripts that had come in from the writers, and it would have his scrawl all over it, and he would edit it and cut things out, add speeches in, make the cliffhanger more exciting at the end of the episode. So it was almost like learning how to craft a story as I was typing. Which was, just invaluable, really. And then I went from there to become a script editor in television, which is very different from radio, obviously, because you've got pictures. Well, I don't need to tell you about how television's made. But yeah, that was...
Slowly.
Yeah, slowly. Well, I worked on Crossroads, so it was actually quite fast. Compared to Downton Abbey, it was pretty slapdash. It was like sausage machine. But, wow, the logistics of that really got my brain working.
Yes. Because it is extraordinary, actually, and it's one of the businesses in the world which just hungers for more. You always need new content.
Oh,
that I find fascinating.
It eats up material. You can't write fast enough, really. But yeah, television was great. It was fun. It was the 80s, and Crossroads was very glamorous, believe it or not. I mean, I know it was a laughing stock in some ways, but the stars were,
absolutely
fur coats, Jaguars, gin. They were superstars.
No, completely and utterly. And I think for many people, they provided still points in a busy working day or working week.
Exactly.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And it's funny how the television is now evolving, because it was once in the corner of every sitting room. Well, it obviously didn't exist.
Yes.
And then when I was first going down to Cornwall, my parents had to rent a television.
Yes, from Rumbelows.
We were
Rumbelows.
there.
Do you remember Rumbelows?
And then obviously disappear back again, which is so funny. And we would argue whether they were renting a colour one or a black and white one. So my son, Eddie, always says, "Mummy, were you born before or after World War II?" And I think, great.
Oh, right.
Then after that, televisions have gone into the corner of a sitting room, and now they're kind of exiting again. There are screens which are places to share or watch on Apple TV or Netflix, but they've it is changing again, isn't it,
Well, it's
Ronnie?
quite personalised, isn't it? Everybody just goes off and does their thing on their iPad or their I watch telly on my laptop. I can't remember the last time I turned my actual television on, because I just like to get into bed and binge a box set or something. So yes, it's not as it was lovely all sitting around. I can remember when Dallas came out on a Sunday night. It was just, and that was the highlight of your week. Whereas now you just go off and binge watch whatever, Succession or whatever, and you're not necessarily with your family going, "Oh my God, what's JR up to?" Or it was fun.
And I remember when Downton Abbey first came out, that to start with, and my little son Eddie was at school, and then if he was out of school, and sometimes it was half term, so we'd go into Newbury to have lunch together at some exciting place, and we'd be sitting down in a corner, and there'd be sort of two ladies next door saying, "Well, what do you think of what happened yesterday?"
Amazing.
And it was extraordinary, and Eddie would obviously be more and more tucked into himself, thinking, how embarrassing is this?
How utterly humiliating. And yes.
But nobody knew who we were at all, so it was fine.
No, I suppose they do now, probably, with
it's more
Instagram and things.
But it certainly wasn't then. But again, it was a topic of conversation on the Monday after the Sunday before.
And it was an absolute game changer, wasn't it, Downton? I mean, it really was a sort of next level, glamorous, escapist and romantic and just the world that everybody wanted to be in a way.
Well, it was a costume drama, and I also think that Downton Abbey was began at a time which was more relevant to us now, because, you know, as ladies we weren't going around in Jane Austen dresses and skipping through the mud, or reading by the light of a candle. It heralded the world into which we're more used to living. It's easier to feel drawn into it in a sense, because there's not such a gulf, which I think is important. And for my own world of writing, I've started in 1895 and gone forwards rather than gone backwards. Yeah. Because again, I think it's the world in which we relate to, with cars instead of horses and aviation.
Watching how women evolve and become more powerful and become more
more part of society. I mean, when you think, it was extraordinary, and I've enjoyed writing about that. It's made me both cry sitting here thinking of my predecessors, and also be in awe of what they did do. But there was some quite poignant moments. So, and I've enjoyed my foray into writing, and it's become part of my soul amongst my other lives, actually, Ronnie. And in a sense, I wish I could spend more time writing, but I don't.
Well, maybe you
quite
should
have that luxury.
You've got to carve out that time, though. That's the thing. It takes discipline, as you know, doesn't it?
It's bloody hard work.
It is really hard work. It is. But, you've got so much inspiration, so there's no excuse, really.
Thank you. Okay, no, fine.
Yeah, I'm going to be really strict with you now.
So after you went to the Archers and Crossroads, how did you progress from there? How long did you spend as a script editor?
So I was a script editor until I was expecting my first baby, and television and babies do not go very well together. So I decided to kind of jump over the fence. So I became a script writer. So I wrote scripts for about 10 years for things like Heartbeat. You probably know Heartbeat, yes, Dear Old Heartbeat, and Holby City, medical drama. That was very difficult. That's very tricky to write, but interesting. And then in the end, television's quite brutal, and the deadlines are fairly draconian. And I was just slightly burning out and falling out of love with it all. And I'd always loved books much more than I loved telly, because actually writing television scripts isn't about words, weirdly. It's about dialogue. And you provide a template for a big team, which to colour it all in. So you don't go into long descriptions about what people are wearing or what they even look like, because that will be decided by the casting director and the costume designer. So you just go middle-aged woman dressed in 1920s outfit or whatever, so it's very bald, and then there's the dialogue. But I love words, I love language, I love description, I love adjectives, and that was always my first love. That was my real escape. I was a bookworm as a child. It sounds a bit glib, I wrote a book and I got a book deal. That's kind of what happened. But I was lucky, I had connections, so that's quite annoying as well. I had a TV agent who introduced me to a literary agent, so it was an easy journey, but I feel as if I'd done my time, working up to it. So it wasn't.
It's never an easy journey, because you may get the introduction. They may say yes, because you've proved that you can hit deadlines, that you can write dialogue, which is part of your fictional world. And then after that is whether you can deliver the book on time and everything else. So
whether anybody wants to read it is quite a big, quite a big part of the deal. But really, luckily, it worked out. So here I am, I think I'm about to start my 24th.
Wow.
Yeah.
An amazing achievement, Ronnie. Well, here's to you.
Well,
so I'm looking forward to your next book, and I'm going to have to go back and pick up some of your earlier books.
Oh, yeah.
If you have to, please forgive me. I haven't read all of the books, but because I write myself, I bury myself in the research for each book, which is usually historical.
Yes.
And until I've finished any book, I just don't stray outside it, because I can't afford to lose my head time.
No, that's so I understand that.
And then when I've finished it, it's almost like breaking out, because I can read what I want.
Yes,
and it's fantastic. That. So you can follow people's suggestions. And Hannah Guttridge, our mutual friend.
Oh yes.
Saying read this. So I did and loved it. I read it very quickly.
Oh, that's sweet.
And my husband's read it too.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yes.
Actually, although I'm sort of targeted at a female, it's women's commercial fiction is the kind of genre, if you like, but quite often sort of husbands of friends or something will pick it up, and then the wives go, oh my god, he can't put it down, he's sitting there in bed.
Well, he wouldn't give it to me till he finished it. The thing is, I think it's because it's set in Cornwall, which he's come to love.
Yes.
And it's set by the sea in the RNLI, which is part of our lifeblood as well, and opposite where we lived, and sometimes there were shipwrecks not far from where we lived. And we'd all be out the next day, watching what happened.
Yeah.
And most times, luckily, most people were retrieved safely. But you were just in awe of the men and women who went out.
Incredible, absolutely incredible.
In these extraordinary seas, because not merely does the friend Lucy you referenced or Nikki in the book go out to sea, they're going out in horrendous seas.
Absolutely.
Because that's why the ship was wrecked, and unbelievable.
Yeah,
Such
it
bravery.
usually is adverse conditions.
That's
Yeah, but not always. It can be because people
kayakers or whatever.
People get reckless on a still day because they think, oh, it's all fine, and then they'll go too far out, and then that's it.
They haven't got the strength to get back.
Yes, exactly. Or
exactly,
they get
which is another
sunburned,
story.
or they go past the point of no return. Yeah. So it's open all hours, I think, if you've signed up to that.
But it is amazing. So it's a joy to try and fundraise for them or something.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the lifeboat in my book is sort of fictional and it's an independent lifeboat, but I'm very, passionate about supporting the RNLI. Yeah. And they survive purely on donations.
I know.
Which is
amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. And all those people do not, they're volunteers. So think about that when you get recklessly onto your paddleboard.
I know. Yeah. No, I hope that because we've been brought up by the sea, we were taught about you have to follow the rules. You never go alone. You always go together. Yes. Everything like that, and you go prepared.
Yes. Absolutely.
And if you're not sure about it, you don't go.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing is to have people around you, not sort of venture off. Tempting though it might be.
No, I know. But it is an amazing part of the world. Either you're North Devon or my North Cornwall.
Yes.
And may you set many more books along these coastlines.
Well,
and I'm looking forward to your next book.
Thank you.
Can you tell me what it's called or not?
The next book is called One Night at the Chateau.
Oh, well, that's very appropriate. Here you are at a chateau.
Yes, indeed. Although it's in Provence, actually, the chateau. But, and that was a joy to research, as you can imagine. Had to go to France and eat lots of nice food.
What a shame.
Yes, it's a tough life.
Well, congratulations, Ronnie. Thank you. And here's to many more books.
Thank
you so much. Thank you for listening to this edition. There are more podcasts from life at the real Downton Abbey on my podcast page at ladycarnarvon.com. And please don't forget to subscribe so you automatically receive the next episode.